Hello, wine fanatics, and welcome to another Wednesday where we're going to taste some wine. We're really not. But we're going to talk to a top flight winemaker from California, one of my favorite winemakers, Greg Brewer. And the main reason we've got Greg coming on shortly is because Greg was just named the Wine Enthusiast 2020 Winemaker of the Year. So, once Greg's on board here, you'll say, this young guy, what does he know? But actually, Greg's got about 30 years of making wine in the Santa Rita Hills. So few people know it as well as he does. Few people have as much experience there as he does, and I think few people are as vested in the Santa Rita Hills as he is. As a matter of fact, he was making wine in the area before there even was a Santa Rita Hills AVA. So that came after his sort of pioneering of the region. Another important aspect about Greg is, what some of you may not know, is that he's actually one of the founding winemaker of Melville Winery, one of the seminal properties along 246 up in the Santa Rita Hills. So anyway, we're going to have a nice discussion with Greg, who's about to log on and join us all the way from some remote location, maybe in the Santa Rita Hills, maybe he'll divulge. So without further ado, there he is.
Hi.
Good to see you, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you heard a little bit of the introduction because it was quite glowing.
Yeah, I was kind of like basking in it, you know. I don't want to interrupt, kind of keep it coming.
No, I could totally talk about you all day, so let's do that. So as I was explaining to our viewership was that congratulations, Wine Enthusiast 2020 Winemaker of the Year. I think that's an amazing accolade, and I'm sure you've got a whole trophy case filled with them so far. And I'm telling the viewers that you've been making wine about 30 years now in that area?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I started in May of '91 in a tasting room at the Santa Barbara Winery as a part-time gig. I mean, I didn't know Chardonnay was a grape. I mean, you know, I liked wine. You know, I liked wine like any college kid liked wine. It was like, It was all good. It wasn't that discerning. And it was an amazing just place to start, you know. It was totally by chance. And that was May of '91. And then I got deeper and deeper, you know, into that world. And then I became their assistant winemaker by the end of '92. So yeah, 29, 30 years, all in this area. So I'm very much a product of Santa Barbara, and then specifically, you know, what we would map as Santa Rita Hills.
Yeah, I figured that when people tune in, when they saw your face, they go, no, he's way too young to have been doing it that long. But man, it's a fact. So again, congratulations. And I'm kind of thinking, it's a great award, well deserved. But what does it mean to you to be labeled such Winemaker of the Year?
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, it's hugely flattering, right, to have the recognition attached to my name. With that said, however, you know, for me, I earnestly see it as an accolade that is bestowed upon the area, and I mean that not in a like faux humble, like, oh gosh, you know, thanks to all my team, you know, it's I sincerely. Because, and I guess what I mean by that is that, you know, everything we do at work is steeped in kind of ritual and discipline and an ethos of like transparency and removal of self and kind of minimizing of oneself and kind of dreading like the insertion of self. And so, you know, everything's raised in neutrality, everything's raised the same every year. It's a very kind of lucid, direct interpretation of place. Right. So for me, you know, the award is really about the place, because that's all I'm doing. I'm like opening up the doors for Santa Rita. Right. I mean, I'm opening the window or I'm pulling the curtain behind, you know, and so without any Photoshop, auto-tune, tweaking, manipulating, you know, winemaking per se. And so it's really that. And I think about all the people that, you know, inspired me, like the real pioneers in the area, most of whom are still totally in the game and current and vibrant and still going after it, which is amazing. I love that they're still here. It's a blessing that, you know, there's still immediate access to those that were here like in the 70s and 80s, for goodness sakes. And everyone around me now, and then everyone that I'm, hopefully kind of inspiring and nurturing and kind of fostering along now, it belongs to all of us, and it belongs to the area. And that's the part about which I'm the most proud. It's a Santa Barbara kind of highlight, and that's exciting to me.
And when you were getting started, it really was just Santa Barbara County. I think this is all pre-AVA official designation. So back in those days when you first started, and it was really kind of the wild, wild west in the Santa Rita Hills, who were, as you were learning more and more, who were some of the people that you looked up to that you felt were really blazing trails? And also maybe what are some pieces of land or dirt or vineyards up there that also you said, I'd like to work with that someday? What inspired you?
For sure. I mean, the list is super long, and just a kind of high spot, top of the head, Bruce, of course, McGuire, who trained me. And then like Bruno at Sanford, Brian Babcock, Clendenin, I mean, Bruno was so kind and, so kind of big and full of life, and his huge hair and, kind of his own persona, and everything that he and Richard Sanford accomplished there. And, and Brian Babcock is always and still is like a handful of steps ahead of everybody. Like, and sometimes I'm not sure like where he's even going, but like he's always pushing boundaries, as far as everything, kind of interpretation, that vineyard designating, Mount Carmel. I mean, the things that Brian did, when I was starting were really inspirational. And Rick Longoria, Fred Brander. I mean, all the old, the old school people. And as far as sites up here, Santa Rita Hill, or, the area that we would map as Santa Rita Hills back then, there were only a few hundred acres and like 5 or 6 vineyards, right? It was like Sanford and Benedict and LaFond and Babcock, Huber, Sweeney, and that was about it, right? And then that big boom of planting in the mid to late 90s was really kind of like the next chapter. And I was kind of on that wave, so to speak, with Melville, different things that were going on then. And but certainly, like, I'll never forget Mount Carmel, like that vineyard perched above Sanford and Benedict, and the convent that was being built, and the nuns were still involved, and Brian was doing it, and it was like, oh my gosh, like that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'll never forget, gaining access to that vineyard in 2000, which is the first time that we produced a Chardonnay from there. I remember that day. I remember every minute of that day. I mean, it was like the most incredible thing to like be there, because we had looked at it from afar, like, dreaming. And so that, that would be one, and it's so beautiful to see that vineyard still, it's changed hands as far as who's been working with it over time. We certainly had an era there, but, everything that Matt Dees and the Hill team and Mail Road, those wines are phenomenal. And Matt's hands are so gentle, and that team is so disciplined and earnest and sincere that it's beautiful to kind of see it carrying on, it's really, really cool.
So I got into the wine business in late '99, and in a store that really focused on Napa Valley Cabernet, but little by little, of course, being in LA, you heard this, talk about things are exploding up in that area. So you start driving up there. And again, I've really found it to be sort of like a work in progress. Now at this stage of my career, 20 years later, I find when I taste the wines, and I was there about 2 weeks ago, the wines have so come into their own and they're no longer a work in progress other than, what great wineries do. But I now find that they're completely on par with any great wines anywhere in the world. And as you drive either 246 to the north or Santa Rosa Road, the explosion of vineyards that have been planted, as well as a few other plantings, which we won't get into that. But do you find now when you go through there, like, wow, then, like, does it ever surprise you how the neighborhood has changed?
Yeah, for sure. It was so like just rural before, I come from LA, I come from like the west side of LA, growing up in the 80s, so for me to come from like that background into any kind of rural setting, that was the biggest leap. And certainly back then it was very ag and very, very quiet. And it still is. I mean, there's still diversity, as you mentioned, there's diversity within agriculture, and then there's not, it's still not like crazy. However, as you mentioned very astutely, it is surprising, and it's with some frequency that I'm driving up and down the road. I mean, I live on Highway 246. I mean, that's like I'm like a dog on a run. I don't even need
Yeah.
it's like I go forward and I'm like a tram. But like it's beautiful to see. Even, things slowed down a little bit during the economic downturn, as far as confidence in planting and the financial landscape, which makes sense. But even then, some things are still going in. And then of course now, it feels very brisk again. And what I love about it is that you're seeing at the same time, small-ish, it still costs money, right? So I say small, or, kind of small financial, moderate, I guess, as far as, 20 acres, 10 acres, some kind of family things. And then you see corporate things going on, you're seeing foreign investment going on. And I think it's all very healthy, right? Because they're all like the octopus tattoo on my arm. I mean, it's all these different kind of arms, and all of those arms will keep furthering this message. And the styles will be different, because as you know, the picking parameters here are so huge as far as stylistic opportunity that I think that's cool too. I mean, we have a long season. You can pick early if that's your priority. That's great because you still have a lot of development. You can go in the middle of the season, because the middle's always fine. You can go kind of later in the year, as I typically do, because our weather is, how it is today and almost every day, just like it is for you. And I think it's really cool. I think it's beautiful to see, Kai, like in the past, since we got the appellation about 20 plus years ago, it's beautiful. I mean, in the terms of the wine world, I mean, your compliment is huge, but 20 years is like zero time in wine, opposite of dog years, right? And so, and to see in 20 years that recognition or that awareness, or seeing a section on Santa Rita on wine lists, or a section in wine stores, it's amazing. It's a huge accomplishment about which we should all be super proud.
Is it also true then, with sort of this proliferation and build up, and I mean build up as a good thing, that whereas once upon a time you were kind of trailblazing and figuring out what made sense to you, but like now you have probably so many more peers. Do you find there's more of a, like in the North, Napa, Sonoma, like a more of an exchange of ideas and that kind of challenges so maybe some of your early notions?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning, like any community that's small, like everyone kind of relates to each other in a different way, right? So picture, I don't know, like farmland in 1800. I mean, I'm kind of making this up, but there's like a few people in a community, and like you figure it out together. So certainly even pre me, like between Babcock and Bruno and Jim Clendenin, I mean, they're like band of brothers. I mean, they're so close because like they had to be, because there's no one around. And then, as any community gets larger, it also becomes more kind of diverse as far as people's styles and their motivations and backgrounds and expectations. And that's good, and everyone, there's also in this business, like many, there's a need or desire to differentiate oneself, right? So fashion, art, I mean, everything always the same, right? So, some pendulum swings that kind of get, kind of further and further, which is fine. I think it's healthy. And then there's ultimately a sweet spot in the middle. And I think that's, again, your huge praise. You shared on the phone the other day, and you did again just now, for which I'm really grateful. I think that's really a testament to a lot of that core. Like there's a lot of us are kind of extremists, and that's cool. But I think that's helpful because it buoys up everything. You have to swing for the fences, and you have to fall sometimes or miss the ball. You know what I mean? For it all to kind of go up collectively. And I think there is more kind of unity in spirit and also in kind of wine aesthetic, than even 5 or 10 years ago, which I think is healthy. To better identify the area.
So enough about everybody else. What about you? So why don't you talk a little bit about, so you've obviously, your career trajectory has taken you from working for people really to working for yourself, and now sort of a hybrid of that. So between Brewer-Clifton, Diatom, ex post facto, what's going on with those, and what do you want people to get out of those different wines? And what do you want to get out of them?
Yeah. So I started off, I started off making $5.50 an hour, right? At Santa Barbara Winery. We started Brewer-Clifton with $12,000, 25 years ago. And so, and really, I love working. I love service. I love pleasing people. I love performing for people. I'm not really motivated by ownership, surprisingly, in the way that many are. Rightly so. I'm more motivated by like service and pleasing people. And so I just ended up owning things or owning parts of things because I work hard, I guess. And so, I've gone from being partners in a multitude of different things to this point now for the past 3.5 years that I've been in alignment with the Jackson family. And it's really been the best 3.5 years of my career. And I've had some really scary lows, of course, like anybody, 25 years of doing something. And I've had crazy highs where like I seemingly could do no wrong and we were making tons of money and whatever, huge scores and accolade, And so it's been a roller coaster, a fun one, but a roller coaster. And with all that, the past 3.5 have been the best. And I say that without any hesitation. And I love this, working in the service of people, in my case, the Jackson family, incredible family, an amazing organization. And I've never felt, who have been committed to Santa Barbara for 30 years. I mean, we own the vast amount of Jackson family's vineyard assets are in Santa Barbara. I think it's like a third. I mean, so they've planted a flag in Santa Barbara in a very big way, a relatively quiet way, but a very prominent way.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
For decades. Oh my God, Los Alamos, Santa Maria, and then I'm the first horse in the race for Santa Rita. But they're not kidding around either, down here. And so, or we're not. And the wineries have never felt more mine. I've never felt more supported and appreciated. And all they want is for me to take more risk and to kind of push limits, knowing that I've got the support system around me to keep furthering that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been beautiful. So, and all I want, with those 3 projects, BC, Diatom, and Ex Post Facto, is, again, it's all about transparency. And you see that a lot. I'm sure you present at wines all the time. And the salesperson is, mentions that as a key attribute. And that's, but for us, it's very, very far. I mean, we work with barrels that I've worked with for 20, 25 years. I mean, they're very neutral. There's reverence for history. There's reverence for those objects that resonate because they've been around us for so long. Diatom's all in stainless steel. It's all about like a vulnerable, elementary, almost primitive upbringing of these wines, and raised the same year in and year out. So the Brewer-Clifton wines are always raised the same. Diatom is always the same protocol. So as, again, to minimize myself, and we can pull that off because the weather's so good. So in all the wines, I really want something like unbridled. I want something raw. I want something that transports people the best I can. And that also like bridges, I think for me, the ocean here is everything, right? The ocean, 5 miles cold, our valley, as opens up west to the ocean. We're breathing in this ocean. The landscape is stark and kind of solemn and solitary, like a lot of kind of ocean proximity locales are. And I think with an ocean, for me, it's both serene and it's also very savage and kind of threatening. You know what I mean? So if you look out and it's a nice sunset and you're walking up and you're in Santa Barbara and you see dolphins and balloons, cotton candy, it's calming, beautiful, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like this is really a beautiful contemplative moment. And ocean can also be scary. Whitecaps, undertow, great white sharks, orcas, whatever, what lies beneath stuff. And if our wines can kind of harness that juxtaposition, I think that's awesome, right? I want them to be confident and composed and raised with very gentle, kind of self-assured hands. And I also want something underneath them that like maintains interest, like energy, that drive, that pulse within, to kind of keep them pent up and to kind of keep them driven. You know what I mean? So they capture the attention of people and they evoke kind of curiosity and intrigue in people. That's the goal, I think, with all of them.
But on a more down to earth level, though, but you're thinking like Brewer-Clifton versus Diatom, what's sort of the ethos that differentiates those two?
Yeah, for sure. So Diatom, so Brewer-Clifton to start, all neutral oak, right? So the Chardonnay's barrel fermented, old barrels, no stirring, really no mallow. And so in that case, I see it as like, very kind of refined presentation of a fish, let's say. Yeah, that one. Like a scallop or something that's like barely seared, barely warm. So you're not even cooking it and you still get scallop, but there's been some warming of it. You know what I mean? Like the light is a little more yellow. Diatom is very stark, right? It's more oyster bar. It's more, it's more clinical. It's more green, less yellow. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's that way visually, but it's that way kind of in spirit. But they're both luxurious, right? That's the whole thing. Diatom, it's Chardonnay raised in stainless steel, very cold, bottled early, but it's not about like treble and pitch and something shrieky. It's a big, voluminous, massive textural Chardonnay, just raised that way, right? It's like a fatty protein, or a piece of fish or lobster, whatever, at a sushi bar, sliced thin, yuzu, trance music, right? It's still valuable, it's still luxurious, it's still fatty and decadent, but it doesn't present itself that way because of how it's been presented. You know what I mean? And whereas BC is a little bit more like the seared scallop. I mean, that's kind of the best way to articulate them for me, I think.
Yeah, that's very unique because throughout your history, I've always heard you use these analogies between contrasting your wines with reference to either sake or sushi. And I don't know anyone else who's done that. And I think once it's been done, and it's yours, man. You trade. Anyone else pulls that off, they're going to be called for plagiarism. and then also down the line came along Ex Post Facto, your Syrah project. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Ex Post came about in 2016 was the first release of that wine. And I've been involved with Syrah up and down the road my whole career. So Santa Barbara Winery in '93, they grafted some Chenin Blanc over to Syrah at La Fawn Vineyard. That was the first time I'd seen the grapes. I was 23 years old. I'm like, well, that's cool. And that's when a lot of people in the neighborhood, thanks to Bob Lindquist at Le Coupé, who was the pioneer, a lot of us kind of jumped on that. And so there, and then of course Melville for those 17, 18 years working with Syrah. So I've always been around it and I've always enjoyed it and it's cool. And it seemed very appropriate for this landscape, but we had never done it here. And so it just kind of came up in conversation with some former partners of mine, kind of the transition partners between the Cliftons and Jackson family. And they're like, oh gosh, we should do a Syrah project. And I thought, yeah, cool, let's go for it. And so that's what gave birth to that. And it's really raised with the same mindset of Brewer-Clifton, all whole cluster fermented and long time in fermenter and all old barrels. But for us, it's kind of, and it comes in late in the season, of course. So it's kind of like in a restaurant, it's like our bar crowd, like all the Pinot comes in and they're served and, dessert, drop the check, off they go. And then Syrah kind of, stumbles in at 10 o'clock or whatever. And we offer the same service, but it's like, we loosen the coat up a little bit, because it's in the evening. And Ex Post Facto, even the name, it kind of plays with, my mom was a DA growing up in homicide and sexual assault in Ventura County. And so I've always been intrigued by courtrooms and her work, especially back then. And so, the Ex Post Facto, it kind of plays on this, like it's deviant, kind of, it's borderline illegal, for me to be doing something other than Chardonnay and Pinot, with which I'm affiliated. And so that kind of gave birth to that, kind of the name of the thing. And then I worked with a design team for the first time in my career for that label. And so I explored with them, like my intrigue with typewriters and letter exchange and like detective work and that whole trip. And then that's what came up with the kind of the typewriter keys,
Yeah, I love the label. I'm sorry to say I don't have a bottle here with me. It's over on the shelf, but
I've got it here.
It's a gorgeous wine, though. The first time I tried it, I mean, what really captured was just the fact that there's a lot of people who make good California Syrah, but it kind of tastes more like good red wine. For me, it lacks a lot of varietal characteristics. But as soon as I tried that, I mean, you bring that glass to your nose, and it's like, boom, you just know what this is, and perhaps what the inspiration is. But where do you actually source the fruit for that to come up with such a gorgeous, accurate representation of Syrah?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the provenance has been a little bit varied, which is normally not how I roll. I'm very specific, but because of different timelines, it's been a little bit varied. So it started off, and it's always been designated as Santa Barbara County. I wanted, again, with Brewer-Clifton, back when we started, it was all about breadth and designates and that world. And now I'm really finding my real intrigue or pursuit is like singular things and price points that are more reachable for younger things that are $35 and singular wines, like one thing. It's like playing Name That Tune. Like I want to over deliver at $25 or $30. I mean, that's really the goal. it just feels really good. And so I wanted Expos to be that. Diatom is that as well, but I wanted Expos to be that as well. So again, one SKU, one wine under that umbrella. Santa Barbara County, I wanted it very streamlined. And so, long answer to your question, now it's the first year was from Spear, and then a couple years it was from up in Santa Maria and Los Alamos. And then starting in 2021, the vintage upcoming, it will all be sourced from Pearloon, which is a new vineyard that we planted.
Say that again?
Pearloon is the name. It's a
Pearloon.
vineyard planted immediately behind Melville.
Okay.
Up the canyon and up in the hills behind Melville. And so it's a 120-acre parcel that we planted, Jackson family we planted. And there's about 5 acres of Syrah there, and the rest is Chardonnay and Pinot. So starting next year, that will be the sole provenance for Exposed. And the past couple of years has been predominantly from Los Alamos, from one of our vineyards there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So not to avoid the 800 grill in the room, but so like making wine in the age of COVID, how has it affected what you do? Certainly sales have been impacted, but you have at least an elite force for that at this time. And also what's happening up there now in terms of, can people come visit and see you, or are we all shut down at this point?
Yeah, so for starters, like the bigger kind of view question, it's been interesting, again, pre this kind of alignment with Jackson family, it would have been a very, very, very scary time. Yeah. It's still fun, don't get me wrong, but there's a larger ship to which I can tether. And before I was like on a Zodiac boat by myself, you know what I mean? And so this storm would have been a lot more dodgy. Fortunately, for us, we've done, all we can. I've really done all I can to maintain intimacy with our kind of direct to consumer clients, writing emails to everyone who purchases anything, Zoom things, popping in on FaceTime for a dinner party, whatever it can be, so that I'm as reachable as ever. And then, of course, thanks to folks like you, the retail landscape has been the saving grace for all of us, So, and Kay, I'm not saying because you're here, but you've been amazing, for us, for all of us in the wine industry, to kind of to help keep us all going, because it has been scary. So, taking, relying on those beautiful relationships with individuals such as you has been key. And then, and so that's really been it. And then, we've been able, again, because of the fact that I'm involved with this parent, a large, there are always avenues for the wines, so even if our production is going down a little bit, there are places for the wines to go, you know what I mean? So I'm not like burdened by like all this inventory that's freaking me out. I mean, there are things that can happen, obviously way less margin, but things are still moving, you know what I mean? And so that's been a real blessing too, And as far as visitation, sorry, I was like buying time.
0.3. So you're right.
Yeah. Second. The visitation piece, our tasting room in Los Olivos is receiving people by appointment. It's limited because we're predominantly indoors, and that's been a impediment, of course. And so, but we do have a couple, 3, 4 tables set up now outside. Mm-hmm. Mostly makeshift, but one on the porch, one around the side, one in the back parking area on the DG with a hedge around. We're kind of doing our best. And so we certainly encourage visitation in that capacity up in Los Olivos, outdoors, super safe. We're really vigilant about that. And then for a while, for a lot of harvest, we received people here at work. And that was cool because we were able to do it immediately outside our roll-up door, and guests could then see us working. And, they could stomp something, they could taste a grape. I mean, they could kind of, it was very courtside splash zone at SeaWorld kind of thing. And so that was cool. And that era has kind of ended, just because this campus where the winery is, if there's not a lot of activity, is a little, I don't know, it's cool if you're really, really, really into it, but it's a destination for sure. For sure.
No, that's really cool. So so getting outside and away from that, what do you sort of anticipate is the future for you brands? What do you want to do? What do you want to keep doing the same, or what do you want to do different?
Yeah, I mean, I want to keep doing, I mean, this is my life. I mean, this is, not to a fault, but I mean, this work in this area is my identity. I mean, it's who I am. It's more than like what I do. And And I love that, and I love it more now than I ever have, you know. And I mean that 30 years in, and I'm hungrier than I've ever been. And now I also, because of the stage of my career and a recognition such as this, I really see, you know, a very significant platform, and one I don't take for granted and I don't take lightly. There's a lot of responsibility in it, but there's an opportunity now to keep furthering the message of place. And, you know, and again, with the Jackson family, I can stretch out, and I can get that out way more than I could have before, right? Because of the reach of our organization globally. And now with the Wine Enthusiast recognition, that's yet another kind of branch, right? To kind of express that and convey that. And that's really it, you know. And then, you know, be here at Brewer-Clifton. You know, I've never been more here. I've never been more wedded to this place. I've never been more singularly here. And that's not going to change. You know, I've never been happier. Sorry about the phone. I've never been happier. And so that's, you know, I'll stay on here for the rest of my career. And, you know, as I get older and I'm not able to, you know, punch down by hand and climb in tanks and, you know, the stuff that we do, then, you know, I really see shifting into, you know, a continued ambassadorial role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I've always bridged front and back of the house, right? I'm a production person, and I love being on the streets. I love media. I love showing wines. I love presenting distributors and salespeople and getting them fired up on things. That's my favorite. And I love the monastic, ritualistic, repetitive element of production. It's very cleansing. It's very calming. It's really good for me emotionally. And so, you know, I've always bridged those two things. And I do see, as I do get older, again, particularly with Jackson family, there's opportunities galore to kind of just continue on the education, ambassadorial kind of, you know, spirit around the world on their behalf and also on behalf of the county at large.
I love the fact that you get that sort of duality of being like the ambassador, the point man out in front of people. I think you're one of the most engaging wine speakers that I've ever met. But I also do know the other side of you where, like you said, the monastic aspect of almost seclusion, a cloistered situation. You may not remember this, but somewhere in the mid to early 2000s, I came up when you were making wine at Melville.
I remember.
I came up with a friend, and we were hanging out with Chad, and we stayed at the winery, and he took us out, you know, harvesting in the middle of the night and all that. And well, once we realized we're no good at that either. Somewhere early morning, he brought us, or midday, he brought us into the winery where you were just like, you know, laser focused, going to it. And Chad's like, look, we don't normally do this, but we're going to let you guys go in there and spend a little bit of time with Greg. And you gave each of us a project that was going to last probably 3-4 hours. And I just remember being in the big winery. You're just blasting trans music, Paul Oakenfold, whatever else. Not a word was really spoken. You are just meticulously so just dialed in like Ninja Warrior on what you were up to. And we all just, the other two of us, we just worked like crazy. And then all of a sudden it was like 5 o'clock and you looked up at us and said, hey guys, thanks for everything. I got to go turn out the lights on your way out. But I wonder, so that was for me just an amusing anecdote, but I'm wondering, do you still approach the actual winemaking with the music and that attitude and philosophy?
Yeah, if anything, it's gotten a little more intense. Yeah, it's always the same. It's all, you know, everything's done the same here. I mean, I can't stress enough the ritualistic nature. So yeah, inside here at Brewer-Clifton, you know, there's no natural light, so you can really lose a sense of time and invest in the task at hand. No breaks in songs, and always kind of deep trance music. And so you're not 4 minutes of time elapsing. It's fascinating if you think about it. Take a road trip or something, and if you're listening to like normal music, every 4 minutes, it's like 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes. Right. And time drags as compared to like an orchestra movement, let's say, or a trance mix where 2 hours. Oh, whoa, it's been 2 hours, right? You know,
like, is that still the same song?
and then little things, everything's way here. It's very, very simple, and it's very, very specific. And that hasn't changed. And that's just, it's kind of just refined. You know, and in the cellar here, you know, it's myself and Domingo, and then Sonia, my wife, she's kind of part-time. But just the three of us, you know, we didn't even work with anybody outside during harvest, 3 of us. But it's very systematic. It's always kind of the same. And Yeah, that hasn't changed. Yeah, if you came up again and visited here, you'd be like, oh yeah, you'd have flashbacks.
That wouldn't be so bad. That wouldn't be so bad. What? There's an awful lot of bottles behind you there. What are you? Are those your
Yeah,
brands?
so that's, I mean, I can show you on the winery too if you want, but that's yeah, this is called the foundation wall.
Okay.
So this is one bottle each of everything that we made in our first 20 years.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's cool. So, and what I like about it, you know, when people come in, they're like, "Oh, your Chardonnay Pinots on the wall," right? Because that's kind of how it looks, even from your vantage point, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get closer, then you kind of come to realize. I don't know if I'm going to show you like the right thing, but look, 96 Sweeney Canyon. I mean, that's our first vintage, from Sweeney. Santa Ynez Valley was the appellation then. It was before we got to Rita Hills. And then there's an era when Santa Rita Hills was spelled out, Santa, like Santa Claus.
Yeah, there was
But
a
anyway,
lot of like legal issues with that, right? Wasn't there a winery in Chile that did the Santa
yeah,
Rita Cabernet or something that
yeah, Peña
forced
Santa
your
Rita.
hand?
Yeah, they were a little disenchanted with our name choice. And then Richard Sanford went down and met with their lawyers and kind of smoothed things over. And then we arrived at the abbreviated spelling, which was kind of, acceptable by all parties. And that was that. But that's also like a cool part of our history, like that happened. And we were this grassroots thing that started. It was like 12 of us or 14 of us that mapped the appellation, and very pure intentions. And one thing about Santa Rita too that I like to stress is that with a lot of frequency in the world, as we all know, when it comes to borders, there can be a lot of ego involved, that's why they've been fought over for millions of years, right? And it can be a country, it can be a school district, it can be a zip code. I want my kids to go to this school, I want my house to be worth X, and whatever it is. And the motivation can be that, which is fine, but it is what it is. In our case, our motivation wasn't driven by ego. It wasn't trying to get attention like Santa Lucia, Russian River, Carnero, Sonoma Coast. It was simply to differentiate from the east side of the valley here.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time, the Santa Ynez Valley, in the eyes of many, the media and buyers were like, oh, it's warm. It's like the cold Santa Maria Valley and the warmer Santa Ynez Valley, because most of the vineyards at the time were out east. And for us out west, it was very much like, oh, whoa, we're not hot, we're cold. And it was really just seceding from like Happy Canyon and Los Olivos. I mean, that was really our thing. And it was like, well, we're 30 degrees colder than there, so let's identify our little pocket. And then no one opposed it because it was like, well, of course, you're really cold out there. And that's what gave birth. It was very much like education and clarity, really, more so than, oh, we're really great. Like, what about us?
Mm-hmm.
That's really a gentle way. I mean, I think it's like, I'm prideful that like, that was how it all germinated. It wasn't competitive. It was simply clarification ultimately.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of it's a non-ego driven, the genesis of it, where it was more saying, well, we're kind of not that. We're not trying to toot our own horn, but we are something different right now. So,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
listen, I think where I can almost see the time thing here, and I think we've run over just a pinch. I could talk to you all day long, and not in the far too distant future, I'll come up and do that
Please.
face to face and taste some wines with you. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you stopping and chat with us. I know you're very busy, and really congratulations again, Winemaker of the Year. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. And thank you, Kai, for everything, for this opportunity, for reaching out, for everything you and your teams do in all your locations. It's really, on behalf of the whole wine industry, we're so grateful that, you're the ones bringing it to people, you know what I mean? And telling the stories and conveying. No, like that. I don't share that lightly. I mean, we all mean,
Yeah.
we all so much. So thank you for you and everyone with whom you work. It really means a lot.
Be well, be safe, and send us more wine.
As much as you want.
Yeah.
I still deliver.
All the best, Greg. Cheers,
All right, thanks. Bye.
bud.